I'm Ronnie Barrett, and this is another in the series of jazz idiom shows. Today, the story of the trombone. And with us to tell that story, a man who has not only talked a lot about trombone, but has done a lot of talking with it as well. Kay Winding.
Hi, Ron.
And very good to have you here.
Thank you.
Trombone now is considered a kind of a different instrument that has a different place in the American music scheme than it used to.
It sure has. In a comparatively short amount of years, it's come a long way. It used to be regarded as a kind of a clumsy instrument, good for a few humorous sound effects and such.
It wasn't used for very much a color or anything pretty at first?
Let's say it wasn't used really to its full advantage.
Was that because people couldn't play it as well?
Well, possibly. It's a rather awkward instrument to begin with, and I suppose nobody ever bothered too much to get out of the obvious sounds that you could get out of it.
It started out then being used probably most effectively as a fun instrument.
Kind of, yes.
Sound.
As a matter of fact, some of the early songs that were written for trombone, especially back in vaudeville days, minstrel music type things, really show you what kind of a humorous sound they used to get.
And this is an example. This is Lassus trombone.
Get it?
I sure do. Right back on the minstrel stage.
Kind of.
The word tailgate trombone, that's a very popular style of trombone even today, tailgate playing.
Tailgate
People
playing,
love
yes.
it. But the name has a kind of an interesting origin. I wish you'd tell us about it.
Yes, it does. It goes back, of course, to the early days of American jazz back in down in New Orleans, where jazz started. In the old days, the jazz bands participated in all kinds of social functions, such as, for instance, the Mardi Gras parades and such, funerals, what have you. And the bands, of course, would be transported through the streets normally in horse-drawn carriages, and the trombone players would actually sit on the tailgate of the wagon in order to more easily manipulate the slide.
Standing up and playing in a horse-drawn carriage would be kind of difficult. Besides, you'd be knocking the other guys off.
Could be
the
dangerous.
wagon, probably. Here, then, is an example featuring Bill Watrous of tailgate trombone. Tailgate style. There have been a lot of great and good trombone players, certainly. I'm thinking specifically of Jack Teagarden, who began with that kind of music, or something very close to it, and then moved along.
That's true.
Great.
Jack is actually sort of a paradox. He, although he is more or less connected, or thought of as being in the older school of jazz, he did some things way back when, and still does some things that are very technical and very tricky, and some of the things that our modern style of trombone playing is actually based on. We'd like to do a short example of the Jack Teagarden style. Pete Vavona would like to play a little number that Jack made famous called "I've Got a Right to Sing the Blues." If you've ever looked at the stand that a trombone player works behind, you wonder where he has room for the music, because there's a collection of plumbing on it. Trumpet players use them too, but they're so much smaller, of mutes. And I think the mute has been used on the trombone in a much more interesting way, generally, than in trumpet. It has. It's true. Of course, the main purpose of the mute is to, well, of course, to mute the sound, so to speak, to make it softer. Also, of course, to change the color of the sound. This particular thing we put in here we call a straight mute, and we're going to go into a bit that also utilizes what we call a plunger. This is a style of trombone playing that was popularized mainly by a fellow that played with Duke Ellington's band. This is going back quite a ways. A fellow by the name of Tricky Sam Nanton. And of course, this too reverts kind of to the comical sound of the trombone. It's just a naturally funny instrument.
And you're going to do what now?
We'd like to do a number that Tricky Sam recorded with Duke Ellington, which became one of the jazz classics, so to speak, of our time, also of trombone playing, specifically plunger-style trombone playing, a number called Sidewalks of New York. 1, 2, 3, 4.
That was picked up by several people and made into a style that they made a commercial success, a whole business on.
That's true.
Russ Morgan used to do that, and very, very popular. Speaking, when we do about people playing trombone, I suppose the first thought that would come to anybody, at least my age, would be Tommy Dorsey.
Tommy Dorsey, of course, we immediately think of the sweet style, or the melodic, the lyrical style of trombone playing whenever we hear his name mentioned. And of course, he did so much to popularize the sound of the trombone. We'd like to do a number for you that is the Tommy Dorsey identification theme, so to speak, which he made famous. We'd like to have Bill Watrous play I'm Getting Sentimental Over You.
You can see there's a lot to this story of the trombone, and we've covered a lot of time and space already. There is more, and we'll be bringing it to you in just 1 minute. We talked about the influence of certain trombonists and the trombone itself. Then an era comes along to mind now, at least it does to me, where the trombone kind of showed up in the introductions, in the theme songs, in the styles of the modern dance, that is, the dance band that was so popular, the real commercial band.
Right. Of course, we're going back now to the era of the big band, so to speak, which, of course, at that time, which is going back a good 15 or 20 years, there were many bands, which, of course, unfortunately aren't today. However, they were usually categorized into two groups. We had the swing bands, the swinging bands, and on the other side of the fence, we had the more commercial bands, what we used to refer to as a Mickey Mouse type band.
Where do you suppose that Mickey Mouse term ever came from?
I don't know. I guess kind of silly or something, which it really isn't. It's just a super commercial form of dance bands.
And you no doubt have some kind of an example of that.
Well, yes, we kind of do a little bit that I think shows probably the epitome of, well, taking advantage, shall we say, of the slide trombone. Sort of a little bit of the style of swing and sway with Sammy Kaye. Come on.
Perhaps a little bit overdone. Sam, you know, we're just kidding. Sammy's one of my neighbors.
It was beautiful, though, wasn't it?
Yes. Well, it was very big, let's face it.
He's probably laughing on his way to the bank.
On his way back from it. I think that's even greater for us. I don't know if many people realize that Glenn Miller was himself a trombone player, in spite of the movies and everything.
Yes, of course. Getting back to the idiom of the big bands, the dance bands, he, of course, had probably what was considered as the most successful of all of them. He played trombone, of course. He also was an arranger. He also was a tremendous organizer of all sorts, and of course, his music still lives on today.
It sure does. This is the sound of the Glenn Miller trombone section. And I think there's a good reason that kind of music still lives on today, or his kind of thinking did. He certainly used the trombone section.
That's for sure.
Fierce. I guess perhaps a fellow like that. I'm thinking of his beginnings in playing trombone with some of the early bands. Perhaps the fact that the trombone wasn't as well accepted made him turn more to writing and going in that direction. I never thought of that till just now, and I actually got the thought from you. Do you think that's possible?
It's very possible, of course. Glenn was, he sort of started off in some of those early jazz-type orchestras. I forget the names of them.
I'm trying to think of the name of that drummer, and I can't. Everybody there
Pollock,
can.
Ben Pollock,
there
of
we
course.
go.
And he was kind of associated with the jazz movement of the day, so to speak. But, of course, I think his big forte was a presentation of popular music, and, of course, with big bands. And, of course, he did an awful lot to popularize the big band of the day.
The band itself as an entertainment unit. Well, then that began to dwindle, and something else happened to music and to the trombone in this country.
Well, yes. Getting back to the idiom of jazz trombone playing, all around the 40s or so, the early 40s, there was a big change toward modernization, very apparent, of course, with the war and everything. A lot of things changed. One of the main trombone players who did an awful lot to influence all trombone players of the time was a fellow by the name of Bill Harris, who played with the Woody Herman Orchestra then. And he made a record with Woody, which has become one of the jazz classics, also the milestone, so to speak, of jazz trombone playing. We'd like to do it for you. We want to feature Bill Wadsworth on this. It's Bijou. 1, 2, 3. Bijou. Well, now we come to a point where a trombonist came along and began to exert his influence in a very big way on the modern jazz scene. And that trombonist, of course, is Kay Winding. When would you say that what you had to say really began to be heard? Well, I would say probably around the time I was with Stan Kenton. At the time, I was, we had a big trombone section. This was a 5-man trombone section, and I was hired to play lead and also to play jazz. And I did a lot of recordings with Stan's band around that era, sort of the Artistry and Rhythm series. And
yes,
I think that's what
I'm sure everybody knows. Would you do a little bit of...
Sure, I'd like to do one that I was featured on with Stan Kenton's band, a number called Collaboration. And...
sure that there are just untold numbers of people who have that record and many of the others.
That's why I almost lost my lip.
Well, Stan
We used
Kenton,
to play loud, believe me.
Stan Kenton did something in that era for the trombone. At least I've always thought so. Probably by using 5 men and placing such a great emphasis on it. He seemed to like that.
Yes.
I don't know. What's the sound I'm looking for? That nothing gives a dance band but a big trombone section. And a bass trombone, for instance, whoever used it.
He definitely leaned heavily on his trombones, and of course he used the bass trombone. One of the first big bands, I believe, to use bass.
Here's a loaded question for you. Of all the trombone players, I don't mean for you to pick anybody out, because I know you know so many and they're all friends, but if you had to, who would you pick out to give a tip of your hat to?
Well, of course, many in the modern school that I like very much. One of the first ones that I came in contact with who really stood out in my mind is J.J. Johnson. Jay and I had a partnership going together back about 5 or 6 years ago, and we had a very pleasant couple of years. We played together, that is, 2 trombones with rhythm, and we made a lot of albums, about, I think probably 10 within a period of 2 years, which of course is quite a bit.
You made an awful lot of friends, too.
That's true.
This, no question about it, is one of the big milestones in jazz. The kind of thing we like to do on Jazz Idiom is to bring you things which are in themselves milestones, and of course the J&K Association was one of them. Would you do something like that for us?
We'd sure like to. I'd like to do one that Jay and I did. It was a show, or rather it's a song from a Broadway show that took place around that time, the early 50s. Can Can, music by Cole Porter. The name of the song is It's All Right With Me.
All right. It's all right with me, and it's all right with everybody else, too, I'll tell you. We'll be back in just a minute. About every style of trombone playing and every influence except the one we've been listening to all through this program, the sound of the K Winding Septet. And here they are as they sound today in their new album, K Ole, the story with the fringe on top.
jazz idiom, we have tried in each of the shows, and we will in shows to come, to bring you what we consider an important part of American jazz, whether that be someone, a group of people, or an idea. Today, it was an instrument and its development in American music, the story of the trombone. From its beginnings on the stage of a minstrel show or on the tailgate of a wagon in New Orleans, through the time where it was played sweet and funny and every other way, right up to now with Kay Winding and the septet. I'm Ronnie Barrett.